When you become too strong to be controlled, an avoidance fear turns into strategy. And their last move is not love, it's manipulation disguised as concern. Because your strength exposes everything they have been trying to hide. Your calm makes them restless, your silence makes them anxious, and your distance shakes the illusion of control they once held over you. They see that the version of you who begged, explained, and forgave without limits no longer exists. And that realization terrifies them, because your growth means their tactics no longer work. And when control no longer works, they turn to confusion, they turn to guilt, they turn to emotional tricks, they turn to pretending they care, only to see if you still respond the way you used to. They start small, they send a message pretending to check on you, their tone softer now, their words careful, and for a second you wonder if maybe they finally understand. But you've learned that understanding is not the same as change, and love is not the same as possession. They reach out not to connect, but to reattach the invisible string that once tied your peace to their attention. And that's where your real strength is tested, because their concern isn't genuine. It's strategic. It's a way to re-enter your life without accountability. It's a performance meant to test if your boundaries are real, if your growth is solid, if your heart can still be used as a safe haven for their avoidance. And this time, your strength isn't loud. It's quiet. It's in the way you don't respond with emotion. It's in the way you don't justify your calm. It's in the way you let silence answer what once required pages of explanation. They can't stand that version of you, the one who doesn't react, who doesn't chase, who doesn't feed the game anymore. Because avoidants feed on energy. They thrive on your reaction, whether it's anger, sadness, or pleading. Every emotional outburst tells them they still matter. Every attempt to fix things gives them oxygen. And now you've cut off that supply. You've stopped being predictable. And that's what makes them spiral. Because for someone who craves control, unpredictability feels like chaos. And your peace becomes the chaos they can't handle. When they see your strength, they start to rewrite history. They'll twist words, they'll play victim. They'll suddenly remember all the things they did right. They'll try to make you doubt your memory. They'll remind you of your mistakes. They'll say things like, "You've changed," or "I don't even know who you are anymore." And in truth, they're right. You have changed. You're no longer the person who stayed quiet to keep the peace. You're no longer the one who accepted breadcrumbs and called it effort. You're no longer waiting for someone to recognize your worth, because you finally recognize it yourself. And that's what makes them panic, because they can't manipulate someone who knows their value. When an avoidant sees your strength, they don't see love, they see danger. Your strength threatens their defense mechanisms. Your independence challenges their narrative that people always chase, always need, always cling. They start to realize that you don't need them the way they thought you did. And that's when their ego steps in, not to win you back, but to prove they still can. They might say things like, "I've been thinking a lot about us," or "I miss the way things used to be." But look deeper. What they miss isn't you. It's the version of themselves that felt important when you were emotionally available. And now that you're not, they'll try to pull you back into that space, because it's the only way they can feel secure again. This is their last trick, their final move, to make you question your peace, to make you feel guilty for walking away, to make you second guess your strength. And you'll feel it, the pull, the temptation to explain, to defend, to prove that you're not cold. But you don't owe them proof. You owe yourself protection, because this is not about anger. It's about awareness. It's about knowing that their sudden softness is not love. It's fear, fear of losing access to your energy, fear of facing their own emptiness, fear of realizing that the one they took for granted has outgrown them. But your strength is not about winning. It's about walking away without needing to prove that you could. It's the quiet decision to keep your boundaries, even when your heart aches. It's the courage to hold your silence even when their words sound tempting. It's the peace that comes from knowing that not every message deserves a reply. Not every apology deserves access. Not every regret deserves another chance, because forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes it means closure. Sometimes it means loving yourself enough to say, "I see your pattern, and I'm not stepping back into it. They will call you heartless. They will accuse you of moving on too fast. They will question how you became so calm. But that calm didn't come from nowhere. It came from nights you cried and nobody noticed. It came from lessons you learned through pain. It came from realizing that love without respect is just chaos dressed in romance. It came from finally choosing yourself after choosing them 1,000 times. And that choice, that sacred choice to choose peace over drama, clarity over confusion, and self-respect over temporary comfort, that's what makes you unstoppable. Your strength will always be misunderstood by those who need your weakness to feel powerful. And that's okay, because you're not here to be understood by everyone. You're here to be at peace with yourself. You're here to live in truth, not performance. You're here to give love where it's safe, not where it's wasted. You're here to protect the energy that once healed others but left you drained. And when they tried it one last dirty trick, when they try to make you question your strength, remind yourself that their reaction is proof of your growth. Their confusion is confirmation of your healing. Their panic is validation that you've broken the pattern for good. So when they circle back with soft words and old memories, smile gently, because you know the truth now. You know that real strength doesn't chase validation. It attracts peace. It doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be consistent. And consistency is something they never mastered. But you did. Your strength doesn't need to prove that it's strong. It just needs to stay grounded because you've already won, not by defeating them, but by choosing yourself, by loving yourself enough to never again accept less than what you deserve. And that quiet, unshakable self-respect is what they will never understand and what they will never forget. They'll test your peace one last time, not because they hate you, but because losing control feels like death to their ego, because your calm makes them feel powerless, your distance feels like rejection, and your silence exposes the emptiness they've been trying to hide behind confidence. They're not trying to understand you. They're trying to see if they can still move you, if they can still get a reaction, if they can still make you question your strength, because for them, control is safety, and your emotional detachment is the one thing they cannot control. It's the one thing that reminds them that their patterns no longer work, and that terrifies them more than anything. When you used to chase, they felt secure. They could push and pull knowing you'd never leave. They could go silent and watch you crumble. They could withhold affection and wait for you to overcompensate. But now, that cycle is broken. You don't respond the same way. You don't explain the way you used to. You don't beg for clarity. You don't fight for attention. You just let the distance exist. And that's when they start to panic, because the person they used to control has become unpredictable. Your peace is unbothered. Your calm is foreign, and your silence is deafening to someone who needs chaos to feel alive. They start to test you in subtle ways. They may reach out in a moment of nostalgia, acting like they miss you. But there's hesitation behind their words. There's calculation in their tone, because this isn't love reaching out. It's fear. It's the fear of realizing they've lost control of your emotions. It's the fear that your heart no longer beats in reaction to theirs. It's the fear that your life now exists beautifully without them. And they can't stand that because deep down, avoidants fear abandonment. Yet they create the very distance they dread, and your silence forces them to sit inside that contradiction. When they can't control your heart anymore, they try to control the narrative. They might twist the story to make you look cold. They'll say you never cared, that you gave up too easily, that you changed. But those words are not truth, they are defense, because your growth shatters their comfort zone. Your emotional strength confronts their emotional immaturity. And instead of rising to meet you, they shrink. They try to make you question whether your peace is actually pride, whether your silence is cruelty, whether your distance is punishment. But you know better now. You know that peace is not revenge. It's self-preservation. It's reclaiming what you gave too freely for too long. They'll start trying emotional bait. They'll pretend to be vulnerable. They'll talk about pain or loss or how they finally understand everything. And you'll feel that old pull, that old instinct to care, to fix, to comfort, because your heart still remembers, But your mind knows the truth now. You know the difference between connection and manipulation. You know that real vulnerability comes with accountability. And they're not ready for that because accountability takes courage, and courage is what avoidance runs from. They don't want to fix the bond. They want to see if it's still open. They don't want love. They want access. And if that doesn't work, they'll shift tactics again. They'll go cold. They'll withdraw completely. They'll make you feel like they've moved on. They'll try to make you question whether you imagined it all. And that's where many people break. That's where they fold back into the cycle, chasing the validation that once felt like oxygen. But you won't this time, because you've learned that silence isn't absence, it's space, and space isn't rejection, it's peace. And peace is exactly what they can't stand, because peace means you've stopped playing the game. Peace means you've stopped needing their approval. Peace means you've finally accepted that their love was never meant to heal you. It was meant to wake you up. Avoidants are experts at emotional timing. They appear just when you're starting to feel whole again, just when your energy is stable, just when your mind is clear. They show up with the same face but different words, hoping that nostalgia will make you forget the pattern. But you won't, because you've learned to see the difference between missing someone and missing the idea of what they could have been. You've learned that missing doesn't mean you go back. It means you're human. And healing doesn't mean you stop feeling. It means you stop chasing the same pain, expecting a different ending. When they realize their tactics aren't working, they'll get desperate. They'll try guilt. They'll try subtle insults. They'll try to make you feel like you're cold-hearted for not responding. They'll say, "I can't believe you're acting like this," or "I thought you were different." But that's the trick. The moment you defend yourself, you're back in the loop, because defense is reaction, and reaction feeds their ego. So you'll stay still. You'll let the words pass. You'll let the silence stretch, and they'll sit in their own discomfort, because their power only existed in your need to explain yourself. And now that you've outgrown that, their game has ended before it even started. It will hurt to stay silent. It will hurt to hold your peace, because strength is not numbness. It's choosing peace when pain begs for reaction. It's choosing restraint when your heart wants release. But the pain you feel now is healing pain. It's the ache of growth, not the agony of confusion. It's your spirit learning how to stand alone without collapsing. And that's what they can't do. They can't sit in discomfort without running. They can't face the mirror without distraction. They can't love without control, but you can. You've learned how to. And that's why their last test will fail. Because what used to trigger you now teaches you. What used to break you now builds you. And when they finally realize they can't pull you back, when your peace remains steady, when your silence stays kind, when your strength remains soft, they'll feel something they can't name. It's regret, it's loss, it's the quiet understanding that they destroyed the very thing that loved them the most. And by then, you'll be gone, not out of bitterness, but out of growth. You'll have learned that the real victory was never about making them see your worth. It was about ever letting them make you forget it again. And that kind of strength, the strength to stay peaceful in the face of their chaos, is what ends every manipulation, every cycle, every last trick, because you're no longer a participant in their fear. You're the proof that healing is possible, even after they tried to make you forget how to love yourself. Your strength will trigger every insecurity they've buried. And instead of growing, they'll project guilt or twist the truth to make you question yourself, because your power reflects the parts of them they've spent their whole lives trying to avoid. Your confidence threatens their false sense of control. Your calmness makes their chaos visible. And the moment they feel that mirror reflecting back their emotional immaturity, they can't handle it. They can't stand seeing what they've hidden under layers of arrogance, detachment, and denial. So instead of facing themselves, they turn on you. They start rewriting the story to make you the problem, because it's easier to blame your strength than to face their own weakness. They will say you've changed, and you have, but not in the way they mean. They'll say you've become distant, cold, hard. But what they're really seeing is the absence of your old self, the version of you who tolerated their silence, who waited for scraps of affection, who forgave betrayal disguised as confusion. They'll say you're heartless, when in reality, you've simply stopped overextending your heart. To people who keep dropping it, they'll say you're cold because you no longer respond to manipulation with emotion. They'll say you're cruel because your peace feels like rejection to their ego. And in their twisted perception, your healing becomes the villain in a story that used to revolve around their comfort. When your strength starts shining through, it's like sunlight to someone who's been hiding in the dark for too long. It exposes their shadows, their patterns, their emotional avoidance. And that exposure is unbearable. They'll start trying to pull you back into the darkness where they felt powerful, because that's where they were comfortable. That's where they knew how to control. They'll provoke you, they'll accuse you, they'll test you, not to understand you, but to restore the dynamic where your emotional reaction gave them validation. Because for them, being desired feels like safety, even if it's built on dysfunction. And when you stop feeding that need, they'll panic. They'll do anything to make you question the authenticity of your own strength. You'll start hearing things like, "You're not the same. You've changed. You think you're better than me." And those words aren't about you, they're confessions. They're a desperate attempt to discredit your growth so they don't have to face their stagnation. They'll make you feel guilty for evolving. They'll make you feel selfish for protecting your peace. They'll make you second guess whether boundaries mean betrayal. And that's the dangerous part, because the moment you start explaining your strength to someone committed to misunderstanding it, you fall right back into their control. But this time you won't, because you've learned that explanations are wasted on people who hear only what threatens their ego. They can't handle your confidence because it reveals how much of their worth was built on your doubt. They needed you to feel small so they could feel big. They needed you to feel unsure so they could play savior. They needed you to feel lost so they could feel found. And now that you're steady, grounded, self-assured, they have no role left to play. And that loss of control feels like exposure. Because your self-reference forces them to confront the truth. They were never powerful. They were just loud. They were never strong. They were just withholding. They were never in control. They were just feeding off your effort. And now that the effort is gone, so is the illusion. They'll twist the truth. They'll rewrite history to make themselves look innocent. And you look unstable. They'll minimize what they did, exaggerate your reaction, and tell mutual friends, "I don't know what happened to them." But you'll know exactly what happened. You stopped being their emotional caretaker. You stopped carrying the weight of their denial. You stopped apologizing for wanting real love. And they can't stand that, because people who manipulate through guilt always lose their grip when they meet someone who refuses to feel guilty for choosing peace. Your strength makes them feel small because it exposes how much of their behavior came from fear. They've spent years believing they were in control by staying distant, believing they were safe by avoiding vulnerability, believing they were strong by not needing anyone. But your power shows them the opposite. It shows that real strength is in presence, real courage is in openness, real safety is in connection. And that scares them, because it means they built their entire identity on a lie. And to accept that would mean tearing down every wall they've ever built, every mask they've ever worn. And that's not something most avoidants can do without first losing everything they used to control. So instead, they attack, they project, they make you question whether your strength is arrogance, whether your independence is cruelty, whether your silence is pride. They'll do anything to drag you back into confusion, because confusion was their weapon and your weakness. But now you see it. Now you recognize the pattern, and you won't bite, you won't argue, you won't defend, because your strength isn't about overpowering them. It's about outgrowing them. It's about recognizing that you can't teach self-awareness to someone who's committed to denial. You can't fix a relationship that depends on your weakness. You can't build love on top of manipulation. And as they start losing grip, they'll swing between charm and cruelty. They'll give you glimpses of softness just to pull you back in, then remind you of your faults to make you question yourself. It's emotional whiplash. It's the last desperate attempt of someone who feels the end coming but refuses to face it. They'll say they want peace, but what they really want is submission. They'll say they care, but what they really mean is they care about control. And when you don't bend, they'll retreat, pretending they're unbothered, pretending they never cared, pretending it doesn't hurt, but deep down it does. Because your strength didn't just take away their power, it revealed how empty that power really was. You see, your strength isn't loud, it's quiet. It doesn't need to shout to be felt. It just exists, unshaken, unbothered, unreactive. And that calm energy is what they can't handle, because they can't manipulate peace. They can't twist clarity. They can't control what no longer needs them. And that's where your healing wins, not by destroying them, but by outgrowing the need for them, not by proving a point, but by walking away without explanation, not by fighting to be seen, but by realizing you never needed to shrink to be worthy of love. So when your strength starts triggering their insecurities, when they start twisting the truth and throwing blame, stay still, stay centered, stay grounded, because you're not the same person anymore. You don't need to prove your strength. You are your strength. And their reaction is proof of that. They're not fighting you. They're fighting the mirror you became, the one that reflects their truth, the one that shows them what they could have been if they chose healing instead of control, love instead of fear, presence instead of power. And that's why you win. Not because you conquered them, but because you conquered the version of you who once believed you had to be small to be loved. They don't want to fix the bond. They want to test if your boundaries are real, and the moment you hold firm, you shatter the illusion of power they built over you. Because your boundaries expose the imbalance they've spent so long pretending doesn't exist. Your calm detachment breaks the unspoken contract that said you'd always come back, always forgive, always understand, no matter how many times they pushed you away. When you stop playing that role, you interrupt their pattern. And that interruption feels like an earthquake to someone who depends on emotional control to feel secure. They begin to sense that something irreversible has happened, that you're no longer emotionally accessible to them, and that loss of access is the one thing they never prepared for. At first, they might test you gently, almost playfully. They'll send messages that sound harmless, maybe a simple, "How are you?" or a nostalgic reminder of something you once shared. They're not doing it to reconnect sincerely. They're testing to see if your boundary bends. They want to know if you'll still respond the way you used to, if you'll still drop everything just to keep them comfortable. And when you don't, when your silence stays steady and your peace remains unmoved, it shocks them, because in their world, people always come back. People always fold under guilt. People always give in to familiarity. But you didn't, and that small act of staying firm becomes your loudest declaration of strength. Boundaries confuse those who've never had to face them, especially avoidants, because boundaries strip away the illusion that love equals control. They've spent their lives defining safety by distance, defining power by who cares less. And when you refuse to engage in that dance, they don't know what to do with you. They can't use silence as a weapon anymore. Because your peace neutralizes it, they can't use guilt, because you no longer explain yourself. They can't use affection, because you no longer chase it. Suddenly, they realize that the dynamic that used to feed their ego has died, and with it, their sense of control over you. Your boundary becomes the mirror they can't look into, because it reflects their own emotional immaturity. It shows them how much of their behavior was driven by fear. It reveals that love for them was never about connection. It was about safety through control. And when they can't control you anymore, that safety crumbles. They start cycling through emotions, confusion, anger, denial, longing, because boundaries force them to feel the very things they've spent years running from. And that's when they might lash out, accusing you of being selfish, heartless, or uncaring, not because it's true, but because your strength threatens their narrative that they were always the one in control. They might even try to flip the script, pretending they set the boundary first, acting like they chose the distance, saying things like, "I needed space too," or "I realized you were too much." It's their way of saving face, because admitting they lost control would mean admitting they never had it. But you'll know the truth, because real boundaries don't need explanations. They speak through consistency, not confrontation. Your calm speaks louder than any argument could. And while they're busy pretending not to care, you'll notice the cracks in their facade, the delayed messages, the small attempts to stay visible in your life. Because even when they act detached, they're watching, they're observing, waiting to see if your peace was real or just another emotional test. They don't realize that this time, it's different. This time, you're not playing. You're not pretending to be strong. You are strong because you've learned that boundaries aren't walls. They're doors. They keep out what's unhealthy while allowing in what's real. They're not meant to punish. They're meant to protect. And the moment you truly understand that, you stop explaining why you set them. Because people who value you will respect them automatically. And those who only valued control will expose themselves by trying to break them. That's how you learn the difference between connection and control, between love and attachment, between empathy and exploitation. The more you stay grounded in your boundary, the more their tactics shift. They might get colder. Hoping indifference will lure you back into proving your care. They might get emotional. Hoping guilt will make you soften. They might suddenly be kind, hoping nostalgia will make you slip. But none of it works anymore, because your peace isn't performative, it's real, and real peace doesn't need validation. It doesn't need to be defended. It doesn't chase understanding. It simply exists, steady and unbothered, and that steadiness drives them insane, because they can't fight with someone who refuses to pick up the rope. And here's the part that hurts the most for them. When they finally realize you're not coming back, not out of anger, but out of self-respect, they'll feel something they've never allowed themselves to feel before. Loss, real loss, not the temporary kind that can be fixed with a message or a grand gesture, but the permanent kind that leaves an echo, the kind that makes them question every decision, every silence, every withdrawal. And by the time they reach that point, you'll be long gone, not in bitterness, but in peace. Because your boundary wasn't built to make them chase. It was built to protect your healing, to protect your heart from going through the same lesson twice. You see, the moment you hold firm on your boundary, you stop being a chapter in their story, and you become the ending to their pattern. You become the moment that teaches them not everyone will play the game. Not everyone will tolerate inconsistency. Not everyone will keep loving them through avoidance. And that lesson will follow them everywhere, because true strength isn't about teaching them how to treat you. It's about showing them what happens when they don't. You didn't leave to punish them. You left because you finally realized you don't owe your peace to anyone who benefits from your chaos. So when they test your boundaries again, when they try to blur the lines with charm, silence, or guilt, remember this: you're not cold, you're clear, you're not distant, you're disciplined, you're not heartless, you're healed, and that healing doesn't need to be explained. Because real boundaries don't scream, they whisper through peace. And peace doesn't beg, it simply stays where respect lives. Your strength is not in how loudly you say no, it's in how quietly you keep walking when everything inside you wants to turn back. And that's what ends their power. That's what ends the pattern, because no one can manipulate a person who has chosen peace over permission. And once you've chosen that, once you've learned to love yourself enough to stay firm, the test ends, the illusion breaks, and you finally realize that your boundary wasn't about losing them. It was about finding you. The real power is not in showing them you're strong. It's in staying calm when they try to pull you back into the storm you already survived. Because that calm is what they can't understand. That calm is what they can't manipulate. That calm is what reminds them they no longer have control. They used to feed on your reactions. They thrived on your emotions. They measured their worth by how much they could shake your peace. But now, when they try, nothing happens. No chaos, no argument, no tears. And that silence burns them more than any confrontation ever could. Because your peace tells them that their importance in your life has ended, that their ability to control the rhythm of your emotions is gone. And that's the one thing their ego can't tolerate. When you stay calm, you strip them of their favorite weapon, because reaction was always their power source. Every time they pulled away and you panicked, they felt validated. Every time you cried, begged, or explained, they felt significant. Every time you doubted yourself because of their manipulation, they felt safe because your confusion meant control. But calm ruins that. Calm breaks the loop. Calm says, I don't need to fight for peace. I am peace. And that's when they lose their footing. They start trying to provoke, pushing buttons they installed in you long ago, hoping one of them will still work. They might suddenly withdraw again to see if you chase, or they might reach out with sweetness to see if you melt. But this time, you won't, because you've learned that the same game that once hurt you now only exposes their fear. Your peace is their mirror. It reflects the truth they've been avoiding. It shows them that their manipulation isn't power, it's weakness. It's a lack of emotional maturity dressed up as control. And when you stop responding, they finally have to sit with themselves, with the silence they once used against you. And that silence becomes their punishment, not because you wanted to hurt them, but because they can't escape what it reveals. It shows them that you were never the unstable one. You were never the dramatic one. You were never the needy one. You were simply the one who cared too much for someone who didn't know how to receive it. And now your calm has become the proof of that truth. They will try everything to break it. They'll send you mixed messages. They'll disappear and reappear. They'll talk about how much you've changed. They'll accuse you of being cold or prideful. And every word will be an attempt to pull you back into the emotional cycle where they feel most powerful. But you won't give them that satisfaction because your calm isn't fake. It's not a tactic. It's not a performance. It's the byproduct of healing, of understanding that you no longer need to win the argument to win your freedom. It's the maturity of knowing that not everything deserves your energy. Not every silence needs to be broken. Not every lie deserves correction. And not every person deserves access to your peace. They'll sense it. They'll feel the shift in your energy because peace feels final. Peace feels irreversible. Peace feels like goodbye without words. And that's what terrifies them most, because now, for the first time, they realize they can't reach you anymore. They can't predict you. They can't manipulate you. They can't guilt you. And that realization hits harder than any rejection, because your silence is no longer a waiting game. It's a boundary. Your calm is no longer hesitation. It's decision. And your lack of reaction isn't detachment. It's freedom. When you stay calm in the face of their chaos, you take away their ability to define you. You stop being the emotional sponge for their insecurity. You stop being the one who absorbs their mood swings and makes excuses for their distance. You stop being the emotional supplier for their avoidance, because avoidants only thrive when they can feel superior, when they can make you chase, when they can decide when love happens. And when you take that away, their world unravels, because they can no longer sustain the illusion of control. You've made them face the truth that their silence is powerless against someone who no longer seeks noise, that their manipulation is useless against someone who no longer needs validation, that their ego is fragile in the presence of your composure. They'll call your peace arrogance. They'll call your detachment cruelty. They'll even try to convince others that you've become heartless, but that's because they need a story that protects their ego. They can't admit that you simply healed. They can't admit that you finally stopped bleeding for someone who kept cutting you. They can't admit that their last trick failed, so they rewrite the story in their favor. But deep down, they know you were the one who cared. They know you were the one who showed up. They know they lost the one who would have done anything for them. And the hardest part for them isn't losing you. It's realizing they can never recreate what you gave with someone else, because your calm wasn't indifference. It was strength, and that kind of strength can't be replaced. Peace is the final stage of power, because peace means you've stopped living in reaction. It means you've stopped letting other people's chaos dictate your emotions. It means you've stopped fighting for attention from people who are terrified of intimacy. And that level of calm is not cold, it's wise. It's the wisdom that comes from pain that taught you everything words never could. It's the clarity that comes from choosing yourself over confusion. It's the strength that comes from loving deeply, but refusing to lose yourself again. And that peace will attract everything you were chasing before: real love, real connection, real safety, because now your energy is aligned with truth, not trauma. And the person who once fed on your confusion will feel that shift. They'll remember the sound of your voice when it was gentle. They'll remember your laughter when it was pure. They'll remember your warmth when they pushed you away. And they'll realize too late that what they mistook for weakness was the very strength they never had. They'll realize that your calm was never about control. It was about healing, and that your peace was never about punishment. It was about release, because you can't fight a battle you've already won, and you can't lose something that no longer belongs to your peace. So when they try to pull you back into the storm, stay calm. When they test your strength, stay silent. When they reach for you with the same old tactics, stay still, because your calm is not the absence of love. It's the presence of self-respect. Your peace is not rejection, it's protection. Your silence is not indifference, it's evolution. And no matter what they try, they can't take that from you anymore. Because you've already survived the storm, you've already found the lesson, and you've already learned that the real victory isn't in being stronger than them. It's in being stronger than the person you used to be when you thought chaos was love. And now your peace is permanent, your boundaries are sacred, and your calm is the quiet proof that you finally made it out whole.